Welcome to Rise Up Voices from the Frontlines, your window into relationship, identity, safety, emotional awareness, regulation and intelligence, unleashed potential, passion and purpose.
Scars tell stories. Welcome back to Rise Up Voices from the Frontlines, and this is a trauma-informed leadership series episode. I'm Krista Fee, and today we're talking about something leaders often try to hide, but followers instinctively look for. Scars. We live in a world obsessed with image. Leaders are coached to look flawless, to present a polished exterior, to appear unshaken by adversity. But the truth is, credibility isn't forged in perfection. It's forged in the fires that we've walked through. Followers may admire your talent, your eloquence, or your vision. But what really earns their trust is evidence that you've suffered and survived. Scars, when carried with honesty, are proof of passage. They say that I've been through the fire and I'm still here. In trauma-informed leadership, scars are not liabilities. We don't want to conceal them. They're actually potential sources of wisdom for us to share. And when leaders integrate their wounds, scars become the most credible form of testimony. So let me tell you a story about the congressman with a scar. John Lewis, the civil rights leader, he bore the scars of Bloody Sunday on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. His credibility wasn't only in his speeches, his strategy, or his ability to organize. It was in the fact that he had been beaten, jailed, and bloodied for the cause that he proclaimed. When he spoke about justice, people leaned in differently because they knew he'd paid for every single word. His scars were his credibility. And the same is true for Nelson Mandela. After 27 years in prison, that didn't disqualify him from leadership. Those years deepened his moral authority. He emerged scarred, yes, but also strengthened. Carrying those wounds proved his convictions were more than words. Leaders who try to hide their scars miss something essential. It's often the wound itself that gives their voice weight. Let's take this idea into the here and now. Charlie Kirk and the scar of assassination. Scars don't always live on the body of the leader. Sometimes the scar is their absence. His assassination shocked followers across the nation and beyond. In the raw grief of that wound, something extraordinary happened. The scar of his death became the very thing that amplified his leadership. Within hours, vigils sprang up in towns and cities. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in person. Millions were tuned in online. What they described was more than mourning and grief. Many called it an awakening. Some even called it a revival. In a time when cynicism runs deep and movements fracture easily, Kirk's death lit a fire that spread with unprecedented speed. His scar, the violent absence carved into his community, didn't silence the movement. It magnified it. This is the paradox of scars in leadership. They're not only proof of survival, sometimes they're proof of sacrifice. And when followers see that a leader has paid the ultimate cost, their credibility and influence often grow beyond what was possible in their life. The scar of assassination turned Charlie Kirk's leadership into a living testimony, an ignition point for a generation asking not just what did he stand for, but what will we carry forward? So why do scars carry so much credibility? Because scars are witnesses. They testify that pain is survivable. They prove a leader didn't just read a book about hardship. They lived it. And in a culture that's weary of hollow slogans, scars cut through the noise. When a leader says, I understand what it means to lose, to suffer, to struggle, and the scar in their story proves it, people believe them. Scars authenticate leadership. They remind followers that the person in front of them is human, not untouchable. And paradoxically, it is that very humanity that so deeply inspires loyalty. But here's the trap. Many leaders hide their wounds. They worry that showing scars will make them look weak. They fear that credibility comes from projecting invulnerability. And the problem is, invulnerability doesn't inspire, it intimidates. And over time, it creates distance. Followers feel they can't relate to someone who appears untouched by the struggles that they face. Worse, scars that are hidden often remain unhealed. Leaders who deny their wounds end up leading from reactivity instead of wisdom. Instead of scars as credibility, they transmit their pain as chaos. This is the trap of unintegrated wounds, because unhealed wounds distort leadership. Neuroscience shows us why. Trauma dysregulates the brain's limbic system, narrowing attention to threat and amplifying emotional reactivity. That means leaders with unprocessed trauma often interpret disagreement as betrayal, conflict as attack, or feedback as humiliation. The result? Organizations that mirror this inner chaos. Fear spreads, innovation shrinks, loyalty is demanded, not inspired. I've seen it firsthand. Leaders who never integrated their wounds often cycle through blame, shame, resentment, and revenge. They confuse trauma reactivity with strategy, and the fallout can be devastating. Teams that are burned out, movements that are fractured, and communities that become divided. The Phoenix warns us, fire that is not harnessed for illumination consumes indiscriminately. I once worked with a CEO who'd been betrayed by a former partner. The betrayal cut deep, but instead of integrating that wound, he hardened around it. Every new hire was viewed with suspicion. Every small mistake was treated like sabotage. His fear of betrayal became the culture of the company. People walked on eggshells, afraid to be honest, and eventually the company lost its most talented employees. Not because they lacked passion for the mission, but because the leader's unhealed wound had become the organization's atmosphere. Scars hidden become systems distorted. Trauma-informed empathy is the gift of well-integrated wounds. Psychologists call this survivor's empathy. It's the heightened sensitivity trauma survivors often report towards other people's suffering. And neuroscience backs this up. Research on mirror systems, mirror neurons, shows that lived experience of pain increases one's ability to recognize it in others. Leaders who've endured betrayal often become better at building trust. Leaders who've faced injustice often carry sharper radar for inequity. Leaders who have lost deeply may show deeper compassion for other people's grief. This form of empathy is not sentimental. It's pragmatic, embodied, and credible. When a scar speaks through a leader's presence, followers don't just hear the words. They feel the truth. I once knew a nurse who had lost her husband unexpectedly. For months, she struggled to return to work, but when she did, her presence was different. She told me, I don't have to say much of anything. Patients just know that I understand. Her scar wasn't visible, but it was in her voice, her eyes, her way of sitting with other people's pain without flinching. And that credibility made her not just a competent nurse, but a deeply trusted one. Scars, when integrated, allow leaders to sit with suffering without collapsing under it. And that's what makes them so powerful. So how do we learn without being anchored? Here's a critical distinction. Scars need to be there to illuminate, not to anchor us. Some leaders define themselves entirely by their wounds. Their identity gets frozen in the moment of injury. Every story, every speech, every decision circles back to the same trauma. But healing requires both acknowledgement and release. The past becomes part of the story, not the entire story. Judith Herman reminds us that recovery involves reconstructing the story of trauma in a way that restores continuity without freezing identity in the injury itself. The phoenix doesn't stay in the ashes, it rises. Scars should say, "This is where I've been," not "this is what I am." And I'll be honest, I carry my own scars. Scars of betrayal, loss, trauma. For a long time, I tried to hide them, thinking that leadership meant appearing untouched. But the truth is, it's those very scars that give me credibility. When I stand before a room and say, "I know what it feels like to be broken," I'm not speaking theory. I'm speaking lived experience. And that experience allows me to connect, to empathize, and to lead differently. My scars are not my shame. They are my witnesses. Scars carry credibility, but they also carry responsibility. The phoenix asks two sobering questions of every leader. What am I willing to die for? And am I willing to lead others into risk, even death, for this conviction? Wounds may prepare you to endure suffering yourself, but leadership also means weighing the cost of asking others to follow you into danger. This is the discipline of response, holding the weight of your scars without glorifying suffering, avoiding the allure of martyrdom or revenge. Integrated scars illuminate. Unintegrated scars demand repayment. Redefining wounded leadership. So what does it mean to lead with scars as credibility? Integrated wounds become credibility, proof of passage that earns trust. Empathy, presence with others suffering without collapse. Wisdom, scars narrating the journey, not defining it. Responsibility, sobriety about the cost of conviction. But unintegrated wounds become reactivity, decisions driven by fear, anger, or shame, cycles of harm, organizations reenacting the leader's chaos, corrosion, trust that's eroded by blame, resentment, or vengeance. The phoenix rises only when ashes are accepted as a beginning, not an end. Leaders too must learn to let wounds illuminate rather than consume. So here are a few practices to help you immediately begin to transform scars into credibility. Name the wound. Journal, speak, or process with a mentor until you can say, "This happened to me," without shame. Seek integration, not erasure. Don't deny pain, but don't wallow in it. Fold it into wisdom. Practice survivor's empathy. Use your lived experience to sit with others instead of avoiding or over-identifying. And check for reactivity. Ask yourself, am I leading from wisdom or from my wound? Narrate those scars as a journey. Share stories in ways that point to growth and transformation, not to grievance and victim identity. And when you're ready for deeper self-reflection, ask yourself, what scars in my life carry credibility and how am I sharing them? Which wounds remain unintegrated still shaping my leadership in reactive ways? How can I let my scars illuminate the path forward without anchoring me to the past? Scars are witnesses, not shame to be hidden and shoved into dark boxes closed up inside us. Credibility isn't earned in comfort, it's earned by walking through life's fires. Scars are not signs of weakness. They're proof of survival, and when integrated, they become wisdom, empathy, and authority. The leaders we trust most aren't the flawless ones. They're the scarred ones. The ones who can look us in the eye and say, I've been through it too, and I'm still standing. So let me say it one more time for the ones still resisting this truth. Your scars are not your shame. They are your witnesses. Let them illuminate your path, and your leadership will carry the weight of credibility that no title, no talent, no charisma could ever match. Thank you for joining me today on Rise Up Voices from the Frontlines. This is a trauma-informed leadership series episode. And if this episode resonates with you, share it forward, because the more leaders who embrace their scars, the more our communities can trust, heal, and rise up. Join me in the Rise Up Trauma-Informed Leadership course and community, or ask me about bringing a custom IACET CEU training to your organization or event. Rise up out of the ashes of your experiences and live and lead your life on fire.
Become a Rise Up Hero sponsor to provide mental wellness and crisis response resources for those who serve country and community. Join us in the Rise Up movement today.